Welcome to another episode of Philosophy and Critical Thinking. In this video, we are going to think about Shane Gronholz's article, Consequentialism and Utilitarianism. So let me just situate these big ideas in the context of what we've been talking about so far. So in the last video, we were thinking about the difference between moral objectivism and what we called cultural relativism. So cultural relativism was the view that right and wrong themselves can vary depending on what a majority of people in a culture happen to approve of. So if culture A is a culture where the majority of people approve of eating dogs, then eating dogs is okay in culture A. Whereas if in culture B, a majority of people disapprove of eating dogs, then eating dogs is morally wrong in culture B. So right and wrong depend on cultural opinion. The opposite view of that, moral objectivism, says that that's the wrong way to think about morality. Even if people's opinions or beliefs depend on their culture, truth in morality does not depend on culture, according to moral objectivism. All right, so in this video and the next video, we're going to think about some big ethical theories that logically entail moral objectivism. Consequentialism, in particular, is an approach in moral theory that says the right action is the one that has the best overall consequences. And by consequences here, we're not necessarily talking about anything negative. So some consequences of an action can be negative, others can be positive. For instance, maybe the action results in harming someone. That would be a negative result of the action. But maybe it results in bringing a person joy or pleasure. That would be a positive outcome or result of the action. Utilitarianism is the most popular version of consequentialism. According to utilitarians, the right action is the one that maximizes overall happiness. So if we're thinking about a specific action, in order to know whether it's right or wrong, we'd have to ask, well, what are the consequences of the action? Do the consequences produce more happiness than all of the relevant alternative actions that one could take? Does the action increase suffering? These are the relevant questions to ask. So for a utilitarian, just to give you a concrete example, we could think about something like factory farming. Factory farming results in a tremendous amount of suffering to animals. And humans, of course, get some temporary pleasure out of consuming animal products. But if we're thinking about at the overall level, is there more harm or is there more happiness that results from factory farming? And most utilitarians are in agreement about this particular issue. They tend to argue that there's more overall suffering, and so we should abandon the current practice of factory farming animals. Okay, some of the cases that Gronholz considers in this article. First, there's this case where he's imagining you make a promise to your friend on her deathbed that you will spread her ashes in the Rocky Mountains after she dies. Then, after your friend dies, you discover that it would actually be more convenient for you to just flush the ashes down the toilet because you don't want to have to spend the money to fly out to the Rocky Mountains. You don't want to have to spend your time doing this, and nobody is going to be harmed. Since this action appears to have no bad consequences, according to utilitarianism, there's nothing wrong with flushing the ashes down the toilet. But most of us think that there would be something wrong with this. And so reflecting on a case like this might lead one to judge that there must be something wrong with consequentialism. The other example that Gronholz considers is the example of 5 A-list celebrities all needing organ transplants, or soon they'll die, and there just aren't any viable organs that have been found so far. Now, suppose further that you go in for a checkup with your doctor, and when your doctor's reviewing your medical records, they notice that your organs are perfect matches for these 5 A-list celebrities. So you have a couple kidneys, a couple lungs, and a liver that would all be perfect matches for these 5 people. You could, of course, imagine the doctor saying to themselves, oh, well, I could just get the organs from this healthy patient. And that would involve killing one person. But if I kill one person, I could save 5 lives at the overall level. And isn't it the case that there will be more happiness at the overall level if I save the 5 people at the expense of one? Doesn't saving the 5 people at the expense of one have better overall consequences? So you can see how, according to consequentialism, it might be difficult to explain how this would be wrong for the doctor to kill you to save the 5 who need the organs. Nevertheless, it seems profoundly wrong to do this. How could a consequentialist explain why this action would be wrong if it has better overall consequences? Looks like there must be some problem with consequentialism. All right, how might a consequentialist respond to these cases? The case of flushing your friend's ashes down the toilet, and then the case of the doctor killing you to take your organs and dish them out to the 5 A-list celebrities. One strategy that Gronholz considers is that a consequentialist could try to show that these actions would have bad consequences. Maybe it's possible that your friend's mother finds out that you flush the ashes down the toilet and they become very upset and they tell everyone in the family, and now everyone in the family is devastated. So what appeared to be an action that didn't have any negative consequences turned out to be an action that had terrible consequences. A similar thing could be said in the doctor scenario. You can imagine that in this case, maybe somebody finds out that the doctor kills you and takes your organs and gives them to other people. If people find out about this, wouldn't this have terrible consequences? Fewer sick people would go visit their doctor. People would stop going into their doctor to get their annual checkup or physical because they would fear that maybe their doctor is going to do something similar to them. So doesn't that have worse consequences at the overall level if the doctor takes your organs? Gronholz notes that these are fairly weak responses. And the reason why he says this is that we can sometimes be pretty sure that our actions aren't going to have any bad consequences. And in the cases where we're pretty sure, then what we should do is whatever has the best consequences. And so, it's not hard to imagine a case where nobody finds out in the doctor taking your organs example or in the flushing the ashes down the toilet example. And if nobody finds out and there are no negative consequences, then consequentialism says it was the right thing to do. But even in those cases where nobody finds out and there are no negative consequences, it still seems wrong. That's the point. Another strategy that a consequentialist might take in trying to address these issues is they might resort to what's called rule consequentialism, which can be distinguished from act consequentialism. Act consequentialism focuses on specific actions, and it says that the right action is the one that has the best overall consequences. Rule consequentialism, on the other hand, says that the right action is the one that corresponds to a general rule that, if followed consistently, would result in better overall consequences. So the idea, according to rule consequentialism, is something like this. If, in general, doctors took organs from healthy patients whenever it would, maximize survival rate for all of their patients considered in total, then this would have worse overall consequences than if doctors just tended to each individual patient and never used any of their patients for the sake of, the health of another patient. So if doctors behaved in accordance with that rule in a consistent way, there would be better overall consequences. Now, the main problem for rule consequentialism is this. If what really matters are the consequences, and you know that in a certain case you can achieve better consequences by breaking a rule, then why would you continue to abide by the rule? So this view seems to undercut its very motivation. All right, so it's not obvious how consequentialism in general or utilitarianism in particular would offer us any kind of satisfactory explanation of what's going on in these cases. Right? That's not to say that these examples are knockdown refutations of consequentialism or utilitarianism, but they present a difficult challenge. So it's worth thinking about how we might try to formulate a strategy of responding to them if we find it plausible that the right action is the one that has the best overall consequences.